China's carbon dioxide emissions are still rising, according to a new report, but the use of clean energy is also expanding, particularly in generating electricity. The country's carbon emissions grew 4% in the first quarter of this year, hitting a record high. The largest contributor to rising emissions was electricity generation, with the use of coal still increasing. Rising production of construction materials and the use of oil products have also contributed to the rise. However, non-fossil fuels are playing a much greater role too, generating more than 50% of the country's electricity for the first time. Among them, solar installations generated 34 gigawatts of power in the first quarter of the year, almost 3 times higher than the same period last year. New wind power sources added 10 gigawatts, 1/3 up from a year ago. China plans to reach a peak in its carbon dioxide emissions by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. The report estimates that the country is on track to meet its 2030 goals for solar and wind generation years ahead of schedule. Well, let's talk now to Lauri Myllyvirta, who's a lead analyst at the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air and the author of this report. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So why have China's emissions been so high this quarter?
There's really 3 reasons for that. What you would, of course, expect is that travel, mobility, air travel have rebounded after the end of the zero-COVID policies. Then there has been a string of droughts and low rainfall that has affected hydropower generation, which has then been replaced by power generation from coal. But the largest reason in the first quarter was a major growth in heavy industry output, especially steel and cement, which are connected to construction projects that the government has started to revive the economy. This helps boost GDP in the short term, but it doesn't really align with the aim of consumption-led recovery, which the government is aiming for.
So these emissions are going to go up before they go down. When are they going to go down?
They are recovery and rebound from the post-pandemic. In the post-pandemic situation will probably continue for most of this year. The good thing is that China's clean energy growth, wind, solar, nuclear, is reaching the scale where it could plausibly exceed the annual growth in energy demand, which would then mean that fossil fuel consumption would start to fall. This could happen in the next couple of years. The really big question is how fast energy demand grows, and that depends on economic policies above all.
So a big push in low-carbon energy then, but China is also building more coal power plants. What will that do to emissions?
When you add new coal-fired power capacity, one of 2 things can happen. Either you increase power generation from coal, or the utilization, the amount of time that those plants are being used, falls. The government is saying that they want these new plants to act as backup power and adjustment power to complement renewable energy, which would imply that they would operate a very limited fraction of the year. Whereas the builders, the owners of the power plants, obviously want to operate them as much as possible. So there's a mismatch of interests here, and the government will have to manage this carefully to reduce the utilization of the coal-fired power plants and ensure that investments in clean energy continue, even if there's a lot of supply of coal-fired power in the market.
Looking at the bigger picture, the world is really chasing different climate goals, isn't it? How important is it for China to be part of the conversation on climate change?
As the world's largest emitter, how fast China's own CO2 emissions can peak and decline is, of course, incredibly important. The government has said that they will peak before 2030, but how long before is really essential. China is, of course, also a major investor in energy projects in other countries, has made the commitment to stop investing in new coal-fired power plants. China can play an incredibly important role in boosting clean energy in other emerging and developing economies by directing investments in that direction and enabling them to develop in a clean way.
Lauri Myllyvirta from the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.